So today we're going to talk about some second grade books that we're actually having students read. So the difference is this is their literature. This is where they are beginning to learn how to read. Again, they're continuing off of first grade. We're going to start with Animal Folktales of America. Why did we choose this book? What's the story behind this?
Well, we used to start second grade with The Courage of Sarah Noble, but we found out mainly from our homeschool audience that it was really difficult for students to start with it. Not that it was too hard for them to read, but the fact that Sarah Noble doesn't have very many pictures and it's a lot of text, like you can have 2 pages of full text. And so we were looking for something that would be a more gentle introduction, because if you remember, they end first grade with Miss Rumphius, which is just a picture book. And so then they've had a whole summer, and we come back and we jump into this, which is overwhelming.
Overwhelming, yeah.
Right. So we found this Folktales book, which we thought Folktales of America would be a really nice subject for them. They're at a great age for folktales. But the advantage of it is the vocabulary in this book is not any harder than Sarah Noble. But it doesn't look as hard because it's a bigger font size. There's lots of great pictures on every page. Every page has not a lot of text. So it's like we're tricking them.
It's a strategy.
So they're still reading the hard vocabulary that they should be reading on their reading level, but they're doing fewer words at a time. So we thought that would be a great introduction. And then we moved to Prairie School. We added Prairie School because it is an I can read book, so the vocabulary isn't quite as difficult there. But it is a chapter book, so it would be really their first chapter book. And it has more words on a page, but the font is still large, and there's, a lot of room between every line. Just your typical I can read book. And then by the time we do both of these, then we segue them into Sarah Noble, and they don't have any problems at all. So it really did solve a problem for us.
It's important, we discussed this in the first grade read-aloud section as well, that skill and the literature don't necessarily operate in tandem quite yet. So second grade is really the year where we're trying to transition the student from a parent reading for comprehension and the student reading for skill. So we're trying to kind of bridge that gap in the second grade year. So confidence is a huge part of it. And so we want the student to know that they can read confidently and discern what the book is saying, and have the comprehension part tackled along with the phonetic skill-based part. So this is a really important year. And as Tanya mentioned, just having the student be willing to try and not be intimidated. So the look of the page is really, really important here. And by the end of the year, when they read Little House in the Big Woods, that's a very intimidating book. But as Tanya mentioned, before we started recording here, they feel like readers. When that happens, they feel like readers.
If they can read Little House in the Big Woods, that big book, then they feel like they can read anything. Right. So we're just gradually trying to build confidence. But also, we did feel like it was important that they know who Paul Bunyan is and Davy Crockett and Johnny
There's a lot of
Appleseed.
Allusions here to other American stories that they're going to know and need to know.
And they're very short stories, so they're easy to get through. It's just a nice start to the year for them. A nice, not easy start really, but because they do have a study guide that they have to fill out with this. So we are working on comprehension. We're working on vocabulary, and we're working on being able to answer a question concisely, just like we began in Storytime Treasures. So
and it ties to this prairie theme and this discovery theme and this establishment theme of building a new home that they're going to see in a lot of their books in second grade. And the introduction, I think, is really good in this Animal Folktales book. And it just talks about the courage and the hope. It says, the folktales of America are filled with legends and fantasies and exaggerations. In a new country demanding hard work and wisdom of its pioneers, these stories capture that pioneering spirit of courage and hope. And so that's going to be something that the students talk about repeatedly throughout the year. And so this is just a small dose of introducing story to these characters who exhibit that courage marriage. For instance, Johnny Appleseed is a story in this book, and it's just a couple of really just 2 or 3 paragraphs in this book, but it's also the first read-aloud book that the teacher reads to them, and it's a far more involved story of Johnny Appleseed. So, they're getting these ideas in repetition, and I think that helps.
And a lot of these stories too, like this, the one with Johnny Appleseed, in this particular story, which is different from the read-aloud book that we've done, where I think, is it a bear that's cold and it wants to sleep inside the log, and so he sleeps outside because he doesn't want the bear to be cold. So this is really a lot of stories about people's relationship with animals, which then we're going to see again and again. I think right off the top of my head comes Lassie. This is really a nice introduction to that relationship between people and animals.
And something else that I noticed in this series of books, and I think that that's a great point, and I think one of our poems is a man to his beast is kind.
I think we do that with Lassie.
But it's a poem, and it just talks about that the kindness of a person can be demonstrated by their kindness to animals. And you see this in Johnny Appleseed. In this book, he's kind to the animals, and it makes me think of St. Francis. And in Farmer Boy, as Almanzo is trying to emulate his father, he treats his animals in the exact kind way that the father treats the son. And so the father is doing the exact same is nurturing and caring for the son the way the son is nurturing and caring for the animals. And it also happens in The Courage of Sarah Noble, where she's concerned about her chickens. And so you can see this mirror relationship of kindness being demonstrated to those in your care. And that's a very important theme that we see all the way through, but it's introduced in these very young grades. And if you notice that mirroring, it happens in a lot of the books.
Is it Little House in the Big Woods where Laura is out hunting with Pa, and he's like, there's a deer, and she says, oh, don't shoot it?
Oh, no, that's Courage of Sarah Noble.
Oh, is that Sarah Noble?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's the same theme that they're getting ready to have again, is that relationship between people and animals, and how, the father says, we have to eat. And she says, but it's so beautiful. So that's going to be a big theme here as we deal with, because this year, second grade, except for Beatrix Potter, is very much about early America.
Right.
And so the folk tales really do set us up for the beginning of that year in just a kind of whimsical way.
Are there other themes that you're seeing in this? We talked about pride going before destruction.
There are some fable-like stories in here that...
Right, the frog, the jumping frog who
it's
eats
the
all the
tortoise and the hare story.
Yeah.
Right, the pride goeth before destruction. There are sort of lessons that the student can learn in this book. I think the knee-high man is a great one. He wants to be big, and he wants to be tall, and he thinks that his physical stature is the thing that makes him big. And at the end of the book, he climbs to the top of the tree and learns that, what is the last line of the book? You don't have to be bigger in size, only bigger in the brain, right? So work smart, not hard. Work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And that story goes to where he's going through, like, that is I feel like not a theme, but the way that story is told, I feel like there are so many stories like that where they go from he goes from animal to animal.
Right. It's
help me.
It's a type of narrative. Mm-hmm.
And then he finally gets to the owl, the wise old
That's
owl,
right.
who does help him.
So we've talked a bit about some of the themes that we see in here and some of the lessons that can be learned. But we talked about skill as well, and developing skill in students, not just with comprehension, but with reading in general. What are some of the literary devices that you guys are seeing in this, that this is developing in students?
Well, there's a lot of exaggeration in the folk tales, and that's what makes it fun for the students. But it's also an introduction to hyperbole, just recognizing that things don't necessarily need to be received in a literal form. And just understanding that it takes, 78 men to feed the ox is, of course, an exaggeration, but it just points out that this is a hungry ox that takes lots of food. And so just to sort of teach students about sort of styles of different authors to communicate meaning in an entertaining way. So I think that that's a great thing to do.
I thought we also need to point out that these folk tales are based on oral tradition.
Right.
And so as I was reading them, kept thinking, what were they originally?
And that helps with understanding the hyperbole.
Right, that they are so ridiculous.
Mhm.
But have they always been ridiculous? Or have they just, it's been like that gossip game and
Right.
they just changed?
But something else that's I think valuable in these folk tales is just the use of colloquialisms that a student will see over and over again. I mean, the first story is fish out of water, and so what is we don't when we say a fish out of water, we all understand that as an adult, but the second grade child needs to learn these new expressions. That's right. So they need to understand that it means that you're out of your place, that you're not at home, that you are probably uncomfortable, and
this is literally
that's right.
A fish out of water.
That's exactly right. And so, these are great ways to introduce these turns of phrase and these colloquialisms that we as adults all use and understand, but we underappreciate that the child has to learn these things as well. So I think that's important. Well, and one other story that I really liked in here included the Paul Bunyan animals. And I think this is a fun story because sort of connecting to the exaggeration. This makes me think of Dr. Seuss, which is actually the third read aloud in the second grade year. And so Dr. Seuss is so great because he gives us, nonsense animals and all sorts of nonsense. But that is, I think, an early introduction to fantasy and imagination. And so imagination is one of the things that we think it's very important for the child to develop a spirit of imagination and to appreciate unseen things and even nonsense things in a childlike way. And so Paul Bunyan's natural history and all these crazy animals, I think, connects to Dr. Seuss and is just sort of an introductory kernel to an appreciation for imagination and fantasy.
After discussing a book like this, sometimes you can approach a book like this that's filled with nonsense, it's filled with silliness, and you think, why? Why is this a part of the curriculum? But really, even though it's really just entertaining a student, probably, their interaction with it is one of enjoying the story more than anything else. It is doing some work on the inside. It's doing some work behind the scenes and making them better able to understand literature at a higher level down the road.
That's the goal.